white supremacist terrorism be restored as one of those categories. It was eliminated under President Trump. So this notion that we're keeping it all generic is not true. The FBI already delineates, and what we were doing is reestablishing a category. Senator Booker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Whitfield, it shatters me that you have to be here, and the pain that you and your family are enduring is unimaginable. I want to thank you for turning your pain into purpose. Coming down here has got to be very difficult, and the fact that you're testifying before Congress on these issues just shows me what kind of mother you had.
Yes, sir.
I was also kind of moved. I walked in late to the hearing coming from a classified briefing, and I heard you talk about very candidly what it was like growing up as a black man in America.
Yes, sir.
And how you realize very young that you're perceived as more dangerous often, that's often used as a justification for people taking police action. We know that blacks are more likely to be killed by the police. We know that implicit racial bias. You have study after study that shows a black person, a white person in this country accused of the same nonviolent drug crime, the black person will get longer sentences. Mm-hmm. We know that even black women in this country are more likely to die in childbirth, even when you control for race and education, because their pain is not perceived to be taken as seriously. And the kind of subtle dehumanization that often comes. And what's moving to me about you is that you understand that this is not about black versus white. Right. This is us. We're all in this together. And that we are a nation that needs each other far more than we realize. And I think on that fateful day in Buffalo, we realized the danger of allowing hatred in any form in our country to fester. Because that hate is not just visited upon one, its effects and impacts are felt directly by families and communities, but it tears at the overall fabric of our democracy. Yes. Mr. Pape, I think your testimony was really moving to me, and because this is about the hope of our democracy. It really is. I have never imagined that I would be this worried about the future of our country. And the mainstreaming of these ideas begins to undermine the necessary cohesion for a democracy to function. This is the great question in America's history, and every generation seemed to answer it the right way. Will we get better at being a multicultural democracy? Will we not let the hate of the Irish, the hate of Catholics, the hate of Southern Europeans, the hate of Asian Americans, will we not allow that to undermine the highest ideals of humanity that this country represents? And so I feel like we're on a perilous precipice. I think that so much of this, when I turned on my TV and saw that the January 6th riots, so many of them had anti-Semitic symbols and racist symbols. And so I know from your data that you had that this is not militia, and those are all concerns. And I think my colleague for bringing up the issues of the ease of access to guns is what causes the violence, and we should not ignore that reality. But I'm more concerned about the culture of contempt we have in our country. Yes. And you said something, and I want you, and this, I don't want to create false equivalencies, but I know me as a politician probably would have raised a lot of money if during a State of the Union address, I yelled out an expletive at the President of the United States, Donald Trump, if I had said something like, "You lie." I know this because it happened to President Obama, and that person had their best fundraising quarters after he did something by bringing in that kind of outrage into our sacred civic space in a congressional hall for a presidential speech. And so I guess the two things I want to get in my 10 seconds left is, one is driving this point home that this is not about us versus them. This is about the continuation of our country, of our democracy, that we are inching closer as this this hatred, this contempt, culture of contempt spreads. And then I'd like for you to close by just telling me, you keep talking about the limitations and your skepticism about us doing certain things, but what should we ultimately be doing as this body to try to bring this nightmare that we're all experiencing in real time to an end?
The crucial thing, Senator, is to compare this to the 1920s, when we also had great replacement ideas. Then it was Catholic versus Protestant, and that led to the second KKK. The difference, sir, is the greater polarization of the country now. We are having political log jams today in ways we did not in the 1920s. And that is what's creating, it's almost impossible now for our political leaders to come to agreement on these major threats to our democracy. What we need to do is we need to break through those log jams. And I can tell you the importance of it.
How? What's your antidote? What's your advice?
The obvious thing to do is to build from the center and to build working groups of the 10 of the senators who can really work together the most, and to build out from there, and then to build a national conversation from that group, regardless of what happens in the outcome of the 2022 election or so forth. The difficulty is that the electoral pressures are so intense that it's getting in the way of any serious governing, sir. And this is what's different between today and the 1920s. In the 1920s, we also had these types of threats. We did not have the degree of political polarization that we have today. And we've got to find ways, even as we're polarized, to focus on the center going forward.
So I'll just say in conclusion, Mr. Chairman, there is a toxin, and I actually agree with your prescription, and I think it's going to take thousands of acts of humble grace to begin to cure what is all of these pressures. However, I don't know when the very algorithms that are built into our social media, my friend Van Jones and Newt Gingrich, when they wanted to do a segment on Crossfire, the last one called Ceasefire, the producers stopped them because the ceasefire was making ratings go down. We have all of these larger corporate entities that want to germinate outrage and hate because it sells better. It creates their stronger platforms. It creates greater audience participation. This is the trap that we're in that is germinating hate, and it has infected this body as a whole. So the only correction I would have to you is I do think the onus is on the acts of grace of this body, but I honestly think if it's just this sector and it's not media and business and culture and churches, if it doesn't go all the way down into our neighborhoods, we're lost. And so that's the only hope. We are not only not our enemies, but we are each other's greatest hope and greatest promise for getting out of a trap. And if not, God bless America, but we are in peril.
Thank you, Senator Booker. Senator Cruz.